Cool. So, like Alan said, my name is Saul Maddox. You can find me on GitHub and Twitter as Poetic Ninja. I do work for a really awesome company, Novetta. They pretty much pay for me to do what I love for a living. It's pretty awesome. So I definitely wanted to put a shout out to them. Actually, it was very fortunate. We have a speaker later, Matt, and he actually works at Poetic Systems. And it's funny because at Poetic Systems, I learned a lot of great techniques and tips and became a better developer there. And actually, my nickname is Poetic Ninja, and that kind of comes from Poetic Systems. And so definitely some mad props there. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about route complexity. In your Hapi or Express or your Node apps in general, complexity comes in different forms and fashions. The biggest deal is it adds up fast, it causes chaos, and it's hard to add new features or refactor. And the number one thing I would have to say is, unhappy coworkers with you. So it doesn't take a lot to screw it up, but it takes a few tips to make it really clean and simple. So we're actually going to have a story time. So today we are a developer. We are a developer at a small company. We build applications for companies of different sizes. And today we actually have a customer that is Awesome Auto Parts. They have 20 stores, 200 employees, managers 30, regional managers 10, application administrators that they're going to dedicate to this application is 2. So this is a point of sale application for automotive parts. You've been tasked to work on the editing purchases API. Your boss says, hey, can you please get started? We're busy, I know, I'm sorry. I'll get you the features, I swear. I'll get you the features, start working on it. It shouldn't be hard, it's probably just a CRUD app, right? So at this point, you got this. You've been creating applications for a while. You can do a CRUD API, not a big deal. You're gonna knock out this update route pretty fast. Oh no. All right, so this is a server route. We'll make it a little bigger for you. So to start off with, it's just a simple put. The path is to tickets because these are actually point of sale purchase tickets. You actually went out of the way, you added authorization to it, so they actually have to be logged in. This is a Hapi thing. In Express, this would actually be a middleware, and we'll get to middlewares in a minute. You'd use something like Passport. There's quite a few other libraries for Express. So you went ahead and said, you know what? We know that the person's going to need to be logged in to edit the point of sale purchases because you don't want some random person, just modifying that. And so this is the route handler. It's not much different than Express. You still have a request and a reply. There are a couple small different things, but the payload in Express is actually the body. But we end up getting the new ticket from the payload. We're going to update the new ticket with a new date because anytime a person makes a change to the request, we want to just record anytime that it changes. And we're actually going to, in Hapi, and you can actually do this with Express as well, with a module, a Node module, but we're actually going to return a promise. So what's happening here is we're actually going to say, hey, database, we're going to say ticket. I want you to go ahead and get it based off of the request parameters, the ticket ID, okay? The ticket ID comes from the parameters, ticket ID up here in the actual route, the path. So it says, hey, whatever that is, whatever payload that comes in, go ahead and just update, the new ticket, nothing too exciting. Hey, whatever the result is, because this is a promise, and we're just going to say, once it happens, then I want you to do this other thing. Go ahead. If the result is there, return result. If it's not, go ahead and return. Boom is a error handling library specific to the Hapi ecosystem, but it can actually be used with other libraries such as Express or even Koa. So right now, all we're going to do is return the promise. Once it's resolved, it'll end up getting sent back to the user, the actual response of the result. Not a big deal. You're like, all right, I got this. You go to your boss and say, hey, buddy, my work's done. You're a happy camper, and he says, okay, well, I really appreciate you, knocking this out. It's very simple. We did miss a couple things in there, such as route validation of what actually comes in, but I didn't want to dive into that right now. But he finally comes back to you and says, and I'll probably end up just reading these, he says, we got a couple features that the customer wants. Okay. So the user needs to be logged in. You're like, all right, that's one list off. We only got 4 more to go. Not a big deal. We want the user that users cannot actually edit each other's tickets, purchase tickets. So your manager said one of the concerns that they have is any of the automotive sales representatives, they don't want other representatives editing each other's sales tickets. They don't want to be like moving tickets between people or gaming the system to get credit for stuff, and so users can't actually edit other tickets unless they actually have the role of manager, regional manager, or app administrator. Changing a ticket price can only be done by managers of that store, regional managers, or app administrators. So they're trying to lock this down a little bit more. And changing a store number can only be done by regional managers or app administrators. Store numbers pretty much say, hey, this store gets credit for that sale. And they don't want just anybody doing that. They want regional managers to actually, if they need to make a sale and move it to another store, like that's where it's done. And so, unless if the store if the store number has actually been changed, they said that they want to get an email to send to all the managers who are associated with it, previous store, the next store, and the regional manager, get a notification email. It's not crazy stuff. You've already had the login, so you only have 4 other features to go. You're like, okay, let's dive into this. You've done this enough. And so we still have the same route. We now actually have to dive into a little more because we actually have, this does get ugly, by the way, so that was the goal. So we have our promise, it's returned. We thought we were, fancy because promises definitely help in your routes to make it a little cleaner rather than crazy nested callbacks. But I don't know if you noticed, we're getting pretty nested. And these are just basic promises, if statements, and else statements. But we're actually so we had to change our previous from just updating in the database and just getting a response to, well, actually we need to do some logic. We need to get the actual old ticket. We need to know who created it. So we're going to actually populate that information on the data model and from where it comes from the user. And then we need some more store information. And then after that's all done, we're going to go ahead and do some logic on this. So you just kind of, it's right after lunchtime. You've already eaten. You're hitting your itis, and you're just kind of slowing down. So you just start writing code, what's coming to your head, and you say, all right. So if there's an actual old ticket, because maybe they end up like putting the wrong ticket number or something. If there's an old ticket, let's go ahead and down here we got an else statement. It says, hey, if there's not one, go ahead and say that they didn't found one. So if there's actually if the request session is the logged in user and their ID. If it does not match the old ticket's created number ID and the role is actually not manager, regional manager, or administrator, go ahead and return unauthorized. All right, so we're done. And then like mentally you're just like, okay, next thing, all right, well, we have that next task, right? So if the ticket price is actually, if they provided it in this API call and it's not the same as the old price, and they don't have the role of manager, regional, or administrator, then you need to say they're unauthorized. Okay, well, what about if the store number changed? Okay, so if they actually provided a store number, it's not defined, and it's not the same as the old one, and they have either role or they don't have role in regional administrator or admin, then unauthorized. At this point, you're about to shoot yourself in the foot. Literally, because you're getting frustrated. You're like, wait a second, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm a better developer than this. At this point, things are just getting complicated just a little too fast. You didn't realize it. You're excited. You're awesome. But apparently not as awesome as you thought. And now the whole world knows. No, it's actually just your other co-workers, which are, they're not happy with you. So you go back and said, all right, I got this. I got some JavaScript skills for this. So in JavaScript, I call it else hell. Anytime you're in a route and you're constantly calling if else, you're going to be screwing yourself over. It is used every once in a while when you need to. Don't use it if you don't have to, because it adds complications. It can cause your code to go into a strange tree-like direction where you end up having to duplicate code. You end up refactoring it. You say, hey, instead of checking to see if there's an old ticket, then do stuff, just say, hey, if not old ticket, we're gonna actually just return out of this function right now. Stop it, we're done. Say, not found. Okay, so we've done this with all of our if-else statements. We've cleaned it up. We decided, hey, let's just make this more easier to read, more understandable. You're breaking them down into chunks. So now we have all of our if statements instead. That's all they are, just if statements, returning right out of it. And yeah, so now we're doing a little better. Yay! Sorry. And then from there, we end up adding the rest of our logic. We only had 4 more items to add to this this feature. So the last part is to actually update the ticket. And then they did mention that managers need to be notified if it was changed. And they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll just, I'm almost done. Let's knock this out. You say, if the store number is actually there and it's not matched, and they're already authorized to do it because we already have those checks in place above a couple, statements. Go ahead and just notify managers. We're just going to pretend that's a function that notifies the managers, and then return the result. Otherwise, just return the result. So we're doing okay. It's not bad. We actually have a return promise within a return promise within a return promise. So callback help is kind of what people wanted to use promises for, to kind of solve this. And yes, I could have probably spent even more time to fix this, to make this even nicer. But as a developer, you're like, I'm done. Finally, this feature's done. You're tired, you're exhausted, you're near. Hey, it passed all the tests, right? You got a QA team, everybody does. Anyway, so this is done. Then, lo and behold, new feature alert, scope changed. Who would have thought that the customer actually wants something new? So the customer actually wants the product pricing to automatically be calculated based on all the products that are referenced. So if it references a product, it wants to pull those in. And now at this point, you're like, whoa, I need to break this out even more. So at this point, this is the type of developer you just became. And yeah, dark times. So you end up talking to some coworkers. And you kind of just vent, like, I gotta dive into this. I gotta refactor the code. It's not gonna be as clean. I know this is just gonna be bad. So he says, hey, you're using Hapi. I'm using Express, but it's the same thing. You should look into pre-handlers. I'm using middleware, but they could pretty much do the exact same thing. So pre-handlers pretty much break up your code into chunks and allow you to flatten your code, make it a little more linear, make it a little more understandable, break it down, and so a pre-handler is pretty much a handler before your handler, and you can actually pass it down, so it's kind of like a chain. So Hapi, they're called pre-handlers, Express calls them middleware. All in all, keep your coworkers happy. That's the goal. So he's showing you this, you're excited, and anyway, so I like Giphy, so I find stuff on there. All right, so pre-handlers, again, are just handlers before your main handler. Route middleware are just routes before your ending route in Express. They're just ways to break up code. These examples are specific to Hapi, but all you have to do is Google middleware and for Express, and it's really easy. There are a couple differences, and I will actually point those out. So we have this pre. It takes an array, and it takes an array of pre-handlers. You can actually have an array of an array, and that's a happy thing. If you have an array of pre-handlers and another array inside of those are actually done in parallel. So performance benefits if you do have lots of asynchronous code or things of that nature. So what we're end up doing is we say, okay, we broke down our previous route, and old post is the one that we know we need to get. So we're going to go ahead and pull that out, request parameters, get the ticket ID, and then we're going to actually, if it's not there, say it's not there, it actually stops right here. In pre-handlers, if you return an error, a boom not found, or a boom error, then it'll actually stop the full chain, respond to that error, and it's completely done. Nothing else hits. You can actually, with Express, I believe it's might be called takeover. I can't remember exactly, but it'll also prevent it from the chain to keep on going down. And so when we actually return old ticket, that actually creates a value for this pre-handler. So if I need to access that value, you'll see that in the next one, request pre-old ticket right here. So on your request object in your route, there's a property called pre, and it'll hold any of the values in any of the pre-handlers that you actually return a value back to. So this one that was called old post, actually, you didn't see that. Hold on. There you go. Old post. Well, actually, this is old ticket. Sorry. I'll change that real quick. So old ticket, yay. Old ticket actually has the value of the previous ticket. So anytime on any of my pre-handlers they need any information on that old ticket, they can just get it off of there. So the nice thing is, this is all encapsulated. If anything else with that old ticket needs to happen, that's done there. Authorization for editing this ticket is right here. So it is a slightly more code, but it's broken down into chunks. Also, you could share middlewares, or you could even share pre-handlers between different routes. I have an application that has authorization. In there, it has password encryption anytime the password comes into the server. Well, on all those routes, I actually just have a pre-handler, middleware on there. It automatically encrypts it, so before it reaches any code, that's already encrypted, and so we can't have that leaked out. Somebody can't accidentally do something with it. So it's great for sharing code between routes that you know is going to be there as well. So edit ticket does the exact same thing as before as our if statement, and it returns. Edit ticket price. So this is actually where we would make all those changes. I'll get to that part in a second. So editing the ticket price checks the old ticket price compared to the new ticket price, because that's in the new ticket price. That's actually in the payload right now. Down here we have edit the store. So editing the store actually changed that little area of code. And this could actually be cleaned up, or it could be less code, slightly more complicated if you wanted to actually combine these if statements to do some fun stuff. But complication, I'm not a big fan of. So the first one's just seeing if they're authorized. The second one is actually checking to see if it changes. If it does, it'll go ahead and notify the managers, and it will return that. So what we ended up doing is removing it to the very bottom of the statement to say, hey, anything in regards to editing the ticket store, go ahead and stick in this section. That's where we want it. Because actually we could not have it previously next to this code because it needed to be done asynchronously near the end, and it just kind of gets complicated. But doing it with pre-handlers or middleware, it allows us to have it in the same area. 1 second, all right? Then our handler. So this is our handler now. It changed drastically. So pretty much, if they've gotten this far, everything else has been handled. It takes the payload, it updates the new updated time, and it returns with the promise, and the new ticket is updated. So it's resolved. Things that you could actually end up doing. So we have in the edit ticket price right here, if this got complicated. So we're going to, the next step is the feature that the customer wanted, is to actually go to the database, pull all the prices of all of those different products, combine those together, check if the price is different that the one that they provided. If so, use their custom price. If not, so you could actually, if it needed to do multiple database calls, maybe they're not in the same database, you could end up actually doing this. And then you could do a secondary one, that would be other. And then these would be done in parallel. Once they're done, the next thing would happen. So that's the one of the powers of also doing pre-handlers, is because you can actually have multiple things happening at the same time. So yeah, that's pretty much the very basics of it. Yay. You had a question, so I'll get to that.
The question was, you go and you check whether or not the user is able to change an old ticket. Eventually, you get to the point where, yeah, I'll allow you to change the ticket.
Uh-huh.
And then there's this time gap between where you're checking whether or not the ticket has been changed and the email is sent off. And I don't see the time flow of the events in the code.
So the ticket. So this is the ticket where the ticket gets changed, or they can check pretty much. Hey, can this person actually update the store number?
Yeah, in which case you're not even allowing them to.
Yeah, and it stops, right? And then so that's. I mean, so the goal is to actually stop anything to further be happening, because you're returning from that function immediately. So this notification of managers wouldn't even happen.
Oh yeah, I get that.
Okay.
But the point is that when you are allowing them to look at the ticket, they may change or may not change a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going off to the managers regardless?
No. So this is actually checking if that store is actually different. So if they've actually changed it, then we would do this right here. If not, just go ahead and return right out of that and keep on going with the flow. Okay. So that's where the making sure, so pretty much, that's where that's at.
So it's in a constant loop until the guy closes the ticket.
I'm not sure I understand that part.
So the entire workflow is like the client, being some web browser or mobile app, whatever, sends a request to this particular API. And then the API catches it here. This route handler actually handles it. Before it actually gets to the handler on 68, it runs through all of those pre-handlers in order until it either errors out or it actually gets to the handler. Does that make any sense?
And that would include a submit button.
Yeah, so, okay, so on the front end, and now I can, so on the front end you'd have a UI, it would have a form, and this has, so you would have a get route. You have other team members creating the get routes to actually pull the data. Those are separate routes, and those are done separately. And then once they have the data on their front end, they would have a form, and then they can make changes, and once they hit submit, that's what this put is doing. It's just that one snapshot. It runs through it real quick. It gives the response only if they are capable. Typically, by the time they get to this point, hopefully they're actually allowed to. But we all already know that people get pretty tech savvy pretty fast and learn how to manipulate systems more than for money.
That's just it. The first type of authorizations have to happen before they see the system.
So
the
other routes are already going to have an authorization on them. So the get route would have it, right? And so hopefully it would never even get to this far. But you always want to protect all your routes, making sure that people who are not authorized, you're stopping that on every route, no matter what, because they could end up just having a Chrome extension that all of a sudden scrapes any information that's going on that page, and they say, hey, this person happens to do this such and such, you know what, let me manipulate some stuff, do it when they're not paying attention, or send it to a server someplace else. They try to actually do it and like, hey, we got access. They left the put route open, so even though the get route was actually protected, but yeah, so So middleware with Express is pretty much the same. It allows you to break down your routes into chunks and to exit as needed. So now the price section, it can get as deep as it needs to, and another coworker can actually dive into this route and feel sane enough to know that that's all he's working with. He doesn't have to go to, before, if we actually looked at, I think it's, nope. No, I'm really good at this. Yeah, so, in here, he actually has to know, it's good to know everything that's going on in the route. And this was a API with 5 features. I've worked, and you will end up working on API routes with more than 4 or 5 features. And so it was already getting hairy at the point of us just doing that stuff. By breaking it down, it simplifies things, allows people to dive into the sections that they need to edit, and it just makes everybody a lot happier. So.
And another benefit is that you could actually, so those pre-handlers, you can pull them out of your own modules and include them.
Those auth stuff, you could.
That's making another API endpoint.
Yep.
And use it.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm kind of new to routes.
Okay.
Period. So these pre-handlers that have sort of are here in a collection.
Yep.
Are they separate URLs? Is there anything significant about assign, old ticket, assign, edit ticket?
Nope. So this is all one route. It is one. That's why I made sure we didn't add multiple routes in there, so it's one route. It's the put route, and the path is right here. So it's just pretty much one big function, and then it's split up into a whole bunch of different ones, and it knows when to exit because you're being able to return the errors as needed. So it's just composing a chain. So instead of just having one route and then having it just nested and crazy, you actually break it down into pieces and then say next every time you want it to go into the next part, rather than, okay, well, here's another callback, or here's another if statement, or another, it's deeper.
So what you're saying is the assigned name is basically arbitrary, just so that it adds some meaning to what's going to be passed on down through the array.
The assigned name,
right?
Yeah, the assigned name is, number one, is just to be able to access the values that are being returned in that route right here. So in Express, actually, they do not have an assigned name. If you want a value passed from the previous to the next, you have to manipulate the request object because it's being passed to the next one. So at that point, what you'd want to do is maybe say request _ internals. So that way, it's not, you don't want to mess with the actual request object, because maybe you have logging software or a logging module that's actually tracking from beginning to end everything that's going on, and now it's different and it's trying to wonder why. So you'd actually create your own namespace with Express. That's the only difference between the assign. But yeah, it's specifically just to be able to access that value outside.
Can you show them 61? Line 61. You were trying the result. Is that the parameter that's being passed into the?
Actually, sorry. I could just do that.
Oh, right.
Yeah, my bad.
Right.
Yeah.
You said the execution can happen on parallel.
I'm sorry?
Is it serially happening or is it going to be happening parallel?
Oh, so these are a chain. These are synchronous, like steps. So if you want it in parallel, in Express you can use the async module. There's a couple other things, but there's actually a middleware you can use to do parallel stuff. In Hapi, you actually, if you want something in parallel, you just say, hey, like this is just a chain right here. These will happen in order. If you wanted to, you could have that first item happen, and then you could say, hey, go ahead and handle all 3 of these right here. At the very end, go ahead and put those in an array, and we want these to happen in parallel. You can do that. Makes it for a little bit faster. Maybe it doesn't matter if it's a chain. For the authorization checks, you could actually have them done in parallel. It wouldn't matter. And they're if checks. They're not. I mean, it's actually not going to put performance on there. But let's say you had to connect to an LDAP server and check to see if the person has authorization. Those you'd be like, hey, let's do these in parallel. So that way, I mean, if we can save 50 milliseconds for the end user, let's do it. So, any other questions? So, well. Yeah, anyway, sorry. Besides that, yeah, just thank you. If you have questions later on, let me know. I'm more than happy to help you with your node routes or, yeah. I'm very happy about it. Anyway, so thank you.